Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Welcome to my video on the theory of solution-focused brief therapy. This therapy was developed by DeShazer, as well as other theorists, and focuses on the exceptions to problems that clients are experiencing. These exceptions are explored and converted into solutions. So let's take a look at the theory of personality used in solution-focused brief therapy. First, we have clients are experts regarding their symptoms and know what is needed to improve. So solution-focused brief therapy has a very positive view of a client's motivation and strengths, just as many theories of counseling do. It should be noted here that a solution-focused brief therapist would probably avoid the word symptoms and even problems in therapy, rather referring to these as complaints or concerns. Under this theory, counselors are not considered experts. Only the client is the expert in the counselor-client relationship. The counselor respects the perception of the client, and the client's perceptions are not viewed as inaccurate or incorrect. A counselor using this theory does not consider a perception as something that needs to be changed. So in this regard, you can see this theory does depart from cognitive behavioral theory, or many of the cognitive behavioral therapies, where the focus, or one of the foci, is to change the perception that a client has. Under the theory of solution-focused brief therapy, clients want to solve problems and make positive changes. So again, this part is consistent with many other theories of counseling, including cognitive behavioral therapy. All clients have the freedom to make choices that influence their mental health. In this way, solution-focused brief therapy is similar to existential therapy. And again, this is a positive view of the client and their abilities. Clients can choose to reframe problems so that solutions can be identified. So again, this is similar to existential therapy. Clients have the freedom to make choices, and they can choose to reframe problems, then identify and act on solutions. It's important to note here that although solution-focused brief therapy does have a theory of personality, it does not have a theory of human development. That is not part of the theory in solution-focused brief therapy, and for that matter is not focused on the past in general. So taking a look at the cause of symptoms under the theory of solution-focused brief therapy, one cause would be negative thinking about the problem. And this item sounds similar to what we see in cognitive behavioral therapy. Another cause of symptoms in this theory, getting stuck on the reasons or excuses for the problem. And then we have not finding exceptions to the problem. So when a client is unable to identify exceptions to the problem, this causes more symptoms, or as solution-focused brief therapists would refer to them, complaints or concerns. As you can see, when compared with other theories of counseling, the theory behind solution-focused brief therapy does not have a lot of information regarding what causes symptoms. Under this theory, as I mentioned, there is not really a focus on the past, and additionally, there's not a focus on figuring out why symptoms or problems occur. So what causes symptoms for clients is not really of great importance to a solution-focused brief therapist. So let's take a look at the techniques used under the theory of solution-focused brief therapy. As I mentioned, there's no emphasis on what caused the problem. the counselor is not interested in that and is not really going to ask any questions related to what caused the problem. Potential causes may arise through the therapeutic process, but the counselor is going to be focused on the exceptions to the problem and not what caused the problem. Counselors using this theory believe that change occurs before counseling begins. So they believe the act of making an appointment is a sign that change is occurring or will occur, and during the first session, the counselor will inquire as to what level of change occurred between when the appointment was set and when the client came in for the counseling session. As I mentioned, counselors using this theory are seeking exceptions to the problem. They're going to explore these exceptions with the client and try to build solutions from these exceptions combined with the client's strengths. If one of these solutions works for the client, if it leads to change, a solution-focused brief therapist is going to encourage more use of that solution. And if a potential solution does not seem to be working, the counselor will recommend discontinuing it, and they'll move on and try to identify other potential solutions. Under this theory, there is an emphasis on creating an expectation of change. So solution-focused brief therapists are going to approach the therapeutic relationship, going to approach the client with this idea that change is expected. The expected outcome will be success. And that technique is generally used at some point during every session. Under this theory, therapy is focused on the present and on the future, but again, the past is not important to a solution-focused brief therapist. It can be discussed to the extent that it can help clients find exceptions to the problem, but it is not a focus of this therapy. The therapeutic alliance, however, is a focus of solution-focused brief therapy. Counselors seek to form a positive, change-oriented working relationship with clients. This can be a little challenging under this theory because it is a brief therapy, but still the therapeutic alliance is a key feature under this theory. Counselors using this theory focus on what can be changed. So time will not be spent on emphasizing areas where change cannot occur. And oftentimes what can be changed is behaviors. So solution-focused brief therapists are focused on doing. They're focused on behaviors and what behaviors can be changed. The next technique is the use of complements. And there are many theories of counseling that make use of complements. But this technique is a bit different in solution-focused brief therapy. There are three types of complements: direct, indirect, and self. And the indirect complements and the self complements are question-driven. The direct complements are more of what we would think of when we think of other theories of counseling. This is when a counselor points out the strengths, abilities, and successes of a client. So these are direct behavioral observations made by the counselor. Now again, the indirect and self, they are both question-driven, and they are a bit different than what we see in many of the other theories of counseling. Indirect complements occur when the counselor asks the client questions that are from the perspective of somebody that is close to the client, like a family member, a coworker, or a friend. Self-complements occur when the counselor asks questions of the client that encourage the client to talk about their own abilities, strengths, and successes. The theory behind the use of complements is that it will help make the client more open to change. The next technique we have here is scaling. And again, scaling is a technique that we see in many other theories of counseling. And this is when a symptom or a problem is rated on a scale by the client. And usually the scale goes from 1 to 10. And scaling can be used in both directions, where 1 represents the lowest level of the problem and 10 represents the highest or the opposite. But I tend to use it with 1 indicating the lowest level of the problem and 10 indicating the highest. There may not be much of a difference between the two types of scaling, meaning what values are assigned to 1 and 10, but I do think it's important to be consistent throughout the therapeutic process and however you define the scale. Next we have the miracle question, and this was developed by DeShazer, and it is generally considered a standard question that would be asked in the same way or in approximately the same way when counselors are using solution-focused brief therapy. So here is the miracle question, and this would be asked to a client. Imagine when you go to sleep at night, a miracle happens and the problems we've been talking about disappear. As you were asleep, you didn't know that a miracle had happened. When you woke up, what would be the first signs for you that a miracle had happened? And one of the elements that's important with this technique is, after asking this question, be willing as a counselor to take the time to explore the answer and encourage the client to expand on the answer if more information is needed to answer the question effectively. For the next technique, we have the concept in solution-focused brief therapy of the message. And the message is written feedback provided by the counselor to the client. And this feedback is written during the last 5 or 10 minutes of the session. And it has 3 parts: compliments, a bridging statement, and a task. So for the first part of the message, you have compliments, and this is positive feedback emphasizing client successes, abilities, and strengths, and focusing on the effort that the client has put in to try to overcome the problem. Then we have the bridging statement, and this is really a summary of what the client wants to achieve from counseling, a summary of the client's goals. And then the last part is the task, and this is homework that the counselor assigns to the client, and usually it's behavioral, but a counselor could also ask a client to reflect on a particular situation. And then the last item I have here, reframing problems in positive ways. So a counselor using solution-focused brief therapy is going to look at a problem that's presented by a client and try to reframe it in a more positive manner. This is quite similar to what we see in many of the cognitive behavioral therapies. So let's take a look at the goals under the theory of solution-focused brief therapy. Under this theory, goals need to be clear, specific, and concrete. So in this way, this theory is similar to reality therapy. Goals are clear, specific, and concrete. Early in the treatment process, many small goals are created, and these goals are designed to be obtained quickly. So counselors using this theory, of course, want clients to be able to achieve goals, but in particular, they want to set several small goals in the beginning, goals where the probability of achieving them is fairly high, so the client can experience success and be more open to change. Another goal is the use of scaling. Scaling is a technique but it's also a goal of the therapy, and it's used to establish progress throughout the therapeutic process. As the client continues to use scaling, they can see the progress that they've made, and this is encouraging, and it leads to the successful completion of other goals. And then the last item I have here is to reduce or eliminate dissatisfaction. So moving on to my opinion about how this theory of solution-focused brief therapy can be integrated into a counseling style. And there are certain elements of this theory that I think are useful, and there's a few elements that I think are not as useful. I like the idea of seeking exceptions to the problem. In a lot of theories of counseling, there is a great focus on the problem, where the problem came from, how destructive the problem has been, and solution-focused brief therapy takes an entirely different direction and really just looks at when the problem wasn't there. So it looks for solutions that were already implemented to some degree in the past, maybe outside of the client's awareness. And the counselors encourage the client to apply these solutions more and in a more organized fashion to address the problem. I believe that this concept from solution-focused brief therapy can be integrated relatively easily into many other theories of counseling and is often a useful technique. The next item I have here is scaling. And again, we see this in many other theories of counseling. I believe it makes sense. It helps to track progress. It helps to encourage clients as they make progress. And it allows the counselor to better understand the severity of a particular problem the client is having. This theory has a positive view of the client and their ability to change, as do many of the theories of counseling, and I believe this is useful, and I believe it's helpful to the client. The next item I have here is that change is expected. So under this theory, the counselor is expecting that change will occur. They're optimistic. And I think this is a useful item to integrate into a counseling style. The next item I have here is the idea of giving direct compliments to the client and asking questions to create those indirect compliments and the self-compliments. This theory has a more comprehensive definition of compliments as compared to many other theories of counseling, and I believe it makes sense and it's useful in many circumstances. And the last item I have here is reframing, and of course this is a fairly popular cognitive behavioral technique. Again, I believe this technique makes sense in a wide variety of situations and is useful both when a problem can be changed and when a problem cannot be changed. So in a circumstance where a problem cannot be changed, a reframe is still possible. We can help the client to look at the problem in a more positive way. As far as some of the ideas behind this theory that may not be as useful, or at least I think may not be as useful, the concept of brief therapy may seem appealing in many ways, and I can certainly appreciate that it has advantages, but I don't know if it allows for the therapeutic alliance to be developed as well as what we would see in many of the other theories of counseling. The therapeutic alliance is, in my opinion, a critical part of the counseling process, and the speed at which this particular therapy, solution-focused brief therapy, has to move in order to remain brief is not consistent with the development of a quality therapeutic alliance, at least not the level that I would hope to achieve using my counseling style. Another concern I have with solution-focused brief therapy would be how it does not want to look at the causes of a problem, and really, in general, the past is not explored. And again, I can appreciate why this is done, but I think it's important in many situations for clients to have an opportunity to tell their story and to understand the cause of symptoms, the cause of the problem. Understanding the cause may help the client to avoid the problem or lessen the problem in the future. I hope you found this video on the theory of solution-focused brief therapy to be useful. As always, if you have any questions or concerns, feel free to contact me, and I'll be happy to assist you.